This Pro Staff clip is brought to you by DuPageAngler.com. Be part of something special.
Probably again for DuPage Angler. Summer's coming, catfish time is coming. I'm very excited about it. Catfish has become big bucks over the last, I don't know, 10 years. It's gotten pretty technical and pretty sophisticated. And I'm all for it. But the average angler or new guy to catfish, you don't need a lot of money. You don't need to get super technical with your rigs or your gear. Some very basic old school stuff will work. This fisherman right here says catch catfish by vibration and sound, and they're using crankbaits. They have all these really fancy, strike indicators and line connectors for your different catfish rigs. And that's great, and they're cool, but you don't need it to catch fish. I'm going to show you a lot of it's very old, some old and some basic catfish equipment, and some rigs that you can use and baits to catch catfish. Let's get to it. Okay, catfishing. Let's start with rods. They sell catfish rods. They sell catfish line. What I've done recently, and usually because it's a budget crunch, is these poles are not new. Usually they're kids' old poles or poles that I haven't used in a while. Usually fiberglass or graphite composite. My favorite catfish bait of all time, catfish rod of all time that is was an ugly stick. I had a pair of ugly sticks. The reason they're good is because they have stout on the bottom, yet a sensitive tip. So you have the power to land big catfish and a sensitive tip to detect light bites. Now, the reason I use these old rods and I don't go buying new ones or I don't use my good rods, is because we use some really nasty bait catfishing. And I don't feel like getting some of it on my St. Croix, Falcons, and Brownings, and so forth. So first, let's go over some basic baits. Catfish bait comes in a few different ways. You got your live baits, crawlers, leeches, minnows, suckers, cut bait, live bluegills. Then you have what's called stink baits. You have dough baits, which are basically poop balls made out of old cheese, fish, blood, cod, and those are dough balls that you either make yourself or place on a line. Then you have dip baits. This is one of my favorites, made out of cheese. G&S Bait Company dip bait. Dip baits use these. These are different dip worms. You take the worms, you dip them in the dip bait, get them covered, you cast it out. Problem with dip baits are they don't stay on your line forever. So, if I'm fishing fresh water, I'm taking it out every 15-20 minutes and exchanging it. Rivers, I'm doing even more. The running water wipes it off even faster. There's also a branch off of dip baits called sponge baits. These things are watery, and they use this kind of hook where the sponge soaks up the bloody mess, and this catches some of the crap, and you use these. Then, the next generation that's come out recent is a pool bait. The reason it's called a pool bait, it's take this dip bait and put a bunch of fibers in there so you no longer need the worm. You can take a treble hook, stick it in, and pull them out. I like the G&S dip bait. Dip baits, I like Junie's Pole Catcher Catfish Pasty. But my all-time favorite cat bait is the old chicken livers. I am going to tell you the chicken liver tip that will save your life. See these little cheap pair of knives? I got 3 for, I don't know, $2 or $3. The trick to chicken livers is to cut them. You hold them over the knife and you slide them back and forth down into small pieces. You will no longer need special holding hooks or netting to hold on your chicken livers. As long as they're cold and they're somewhat fresh, you can cut them and they will stay on. Alright, let's go over some other things you will need. Rod holders. Rod holders, you can make them all shapes and sizes. They have these cool ones with these electric warning lights and stuff, which are awesome. But these, you can buy them all day long, really cheap. They'll handle your biggest fish. Quick tip, a slight angle's good. Don't put them all the way down too much of an angle or you will create a bottle rocket. Alright, if you're going to be using dip bait, you will always need something to wash your hands, something to mix it with. Old rulers, old markers, sticks tend to break. I like these cheap 50-cent putty knives you get at the hardware store. You will need a variety of weights. I use probably 2 or 3 rigs. I use a slip bobber rig for cut baits and chicken livers in ponds and lakes. I use a Wolf River rig using weights like this to hold on the bottom, or I use a slip weight rig, which is basically a Lindy rig with a bullet weight or egg weight. This is a pre-made one. Pretty nice rig, Lindy weight. It's got leaders on it. It'd be great for using for catfish in general, but it would also be a great live bait rig for a sucker or bluegill. You will need a variety of bobbers. Catfish is not as technical on using the right kind of floats. You just need something big enough to hold your bait out there. I have basic slip bobbers. Cheap ones that just got to be big enough to hold a chunk of chicken liver or your dip bait. Big ass spring bobber. Or a super windy day, a nice thill. You will need bobber stops. You can use, if you go night fishing, you will need some equipment. You will need some sort of fasteners, and I use these cheap light sticks to attach to my bobbers. They sell electronic night bobbers. They're pretty cool. Got the money, go for it. Old school bite detection. Bells. Clamp on the end of your line. Don't clamp them over your line, clamp them on the rod. Clamp them on after you cast, not before, or else you will have a river full of bells. If you can, take them off before you set a hook on a crazy catfish, or again, you will have a river full of bells. You will need bugs. You think there's a lot of bugs on the river? Just wait until you're covered with chicken liver. Tape measure so you can brag. Something to cut with. Clippers. Scissors. Scissors are good because you can cut worms and pieces and stuff like that. Pliers, of course. Going night fishing. A good lantern. A nice headset. Clip-on lights. Flashlights you want to be able to see very well. The Wolf River rig consists of, which is my favorite, you can use it for rivers and lakes, consists, the way I do it, instead of using a 3-way swivel, or 2 3-way swivels, a Wolf River rig is a dumbbell weight on the bottom with 2 hooks above it. Now you can use 2 of these, but you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, counting your weight, counting your hooks. You could be looking up to 8 knots, and it takes forever to tie. What I do is I use a bell weight, and I use eagle claws. They have the snells on them. You can tie the snell directly to your main line. I use a big hook on the bottom for chicken livers or chunk or cut bait. Smaller hooks on top if I'm using red worms or a minnow or a small crawler in case there's small cats or yellow bass or something else. For my top hook, I usually put my smaller baits on top, my thicker baits, bigger baits, cut baits, chicken livers, dip and stink bait on the bottom. This year I will be going on some catfishing trips, and I hope to get some footage for you. Good luck and tight lines.
I'm fishing the lake so blue, come and join my crew. You could be catch of the day at DuPageAngler.com. That's a wrap.